Hi, everyone. Welcome to Start the Week with Spencer. This is Doman International's weekly webinar where we discuss all kinds of topics from parenting, the Doman Method, early childhood education, and children with special needs. So we have parents join the session from all around the world. And Doman International serves parents from over 80 countries. And so, wherever you are, whether you are joining me on Facebook or YouTube or Instagram, you can type your questions into the comments box and I will get to them in order as they come in. Well, while I'm waiting for questions today, I wanted to start by talking about an important topic, both for children with special needs and neurotypical kids alike, and that is tactile stimulation. When is tactile stimulation needed and why is it needed? So let's start first with why. Why would certain children need additional tactile stimulation? Well, the first reason, which I think is kind of obvious, is a child who doesn't feel well enough. So some children, as they get older, it becomes pretty clear to parents that their child may be unable to feel extremes in temperature, like hot and cold, or there are sometimes other children who lack sensitivity to other things. They may not feel tickling or light touch or caressing. They just don't seem to be as observant or respond as much to tactile stimulation. So those children, everything I just mentioned, children who don't feel well enough, are called hyposensitive. Hypo meaning not enough, sensitive meaning they're not sensitive enough to tactile stimulation. Hyposensitivity is a big problem for a few reasons. First of all, it presents a danger to the child's life. If you're not able to feel pain or hot and cold normally, that's going to be very dangerous for you, right? Imagine you get into water which is scalding hot and you're not able to feel it's too hot, right? You might burn your skin. Or you may step out on a cold day and not know that it's cold, and that might be dangerous. Or if you don't feel pain well enough, I've even seen children who, they fall and break a bone and their parents don't know for weeks because the child didn't feel the pain enough from that injury. So being hyposensitive, first and foremost, is a danger to the child's life, and that's a problem. Now, there are other issues that come from hyposensitivity. If you can't feel your body well enough, well, you're not going to probably move it normally, right? There's a reason why our sensory and motor systems are constantly communicating with one another. For me to move my body in the correct way, first I have to feel it in the correct way. So if a child isn't feeling their body well enough, that's going to create significant motor problems for them. So when we provide a child with tactile stimulation, not only are they able to feel their body better, which, as I said, is a safety issue, that child also will start to move their body better. And often, if we do a lot of tactile stimulation on the hands, they'll also use their hands better. So those are children that are hyposensitive. And I'm going to talk in a second about the kinds of tactile stimulation we do with those children. But then on the other hand, there are also children who are hypersensitive. These are children who are overly sensitive to touch or tactile sensations. So, for example, I saw a child in our clinic last week who didn't like to walk barefoot in grass. He didn't like that sensation. That's because he's overly sensitive, right? I saw another child who refused to wear hats or have anything kind of put on their head, didn't like his hair cut or hair brushed. That child is hypersensitive on their head. There are certain children that don't like to be touched or hugged. They kind of push those things away. They may not like certain textures of clothing. It might bother them. Some children want the tags cut out of all their shirts. So these are children who are hypersensitive to touch. Now, interestingly, whether a child is hyposensitive or hypersensitive, no matter where they are on that spectrum, if they have an abnormal tactile response, they are in need of tactile stimulation. And so in the Doman Method, we find that specifically with children with special needs, over 85% of kids with special needs have tactile issues. and they usually need some form of tactile stimulation. And I'll talk to you about those different kinds of tactile stimulation. But interestingly, we also do tactile stimulation with babies in general. Even well neurotypical babies, after they're born, they are insensate. A baby, when they're born, does not feel their body normally. And so what we do with that baby is we provide that baby with tactile stimulation to get them feeling their body better. And we find that when we do that with an infant, the baby becomes more aware, right? They're more connected with their environment. They often show an almost immediate response to different kinds of sensations and textures. And so that's very important, because when they're more aware, they learn faster from the environment. And also they become mobile, as I said, more quickly. They start crawling on their bellies and creeping on their hands and knees earlier because they can feel their bodies better. So whether it's an infant that's just been born or an older child with special needs, these kids are greatly helped by tactile stimulation. Now, when we provide tactile stimulation, we always provide a contrast, right? We find that it's best to combine a stronger stimulation with a lighter stimulation. So here, for example, I have two different brushes. I've got a kind of very strong brush. It's got very rough bristles, right? When we provide tactile stimulation, we always do it onto the bare skin, right? We don't want to do it through any kind of like obstacle like clothing, because then we're getting less stimulation to the brain, right? What happens is there are sensory neurons located under the skin that send information to the brain through chains of brain cells. So when we provide that stimulation directly to the skin, that information is being sent to the brain. So we'll have like a rough brush, and then we will have a soft brush. We want to combine it because we find that contrast is for a child who doesn't feel correctly, that is one of the best things that we can provide to them. Now, in another session, we might use the brushes in one session. In another session, we might use something, this is like a very rough sponge, right? The kind of sponge you would use to scrub dishes. And then here you've got, a soft piece of cotton, very, very different from one another. By the way, going back to these brushes, because I realized this may not be obvious on video, this rough brush is like a pot scrubbing brush. This one here is like a very soft brush that's used to, I think, polish shoes. So it's very soft in comparison, right? In another session, you might have something like a piece of soft velvet like this, and then you might have a piece of rough sandpaper. So you always want to have that contrast, and we'll usually stimulate the child's whole body with one of these and then follow it up with the other. So you do maybe stimulate the body with the rough texture and then follow it up with the soft texture. So that's what a normal session of tactile stimulation would look like. Now, if there's a child who responds well on some parts of the body but not on others, we stimulate the parts of the body with a poor response. So let me give an example. Let's say you had a child and the child feels normally on the right side but not on the left side. Well, then it's not really necessary to do stimulation on the right side because the child feels normally. You would just do the stimulation on the left side. I do really urge parents, when they're beginning tactile stimulation with a kid, don't just do it on the hands. A lot of parents have this kind of inclination to just stimulate the hands, I guess because that is our primary part of our body that we use to feel things. But given what I said earlier about how sensitivity is a safety issue and it impacts the way we move our bodies, most children need stimulation on many different parts of the body. So I do really recommend, don't just start out by stimulating the hands. Do the tactile stimulation on the chest, the back, the legs, the arms. And then over time, if you notice your child has a normal response on some parts and not others, you can just focus on the areas with a poor response. But like I said, whether a child is overly sensitive or lacks sensitivity, both of those children are in need of tactile integration. And so you really want to have a nice collection of different kinds of sensory materials, rough materials, soft materials that you can use to provide your children with stimulation. I usually recommend parents go to, funny enough, depending on where you are in the world, you might understand this reference. In the US, we have dollar stores. In Europe, they have like €1 stores. So each country is a little different. But in those different stores, they very often have different materials that you can get very inexpensively, but that provide very good tactile stimulation. Or sometimes it's good to go to a marketplace where people are selling different kinds of goods, and you can often find things there, things that you may not have even thought of using. So that's tactile integration, a little bit why it's important for children and how to do it. Mostly a session will take somewhere between 1 or 2 minutes to provide the child the stimulation with both of those textures. By the way, if you want to learn more about tactile stimulation, it is covered in both our books, the Doman Method book. It's called The Doman Method from Special Needs to Wellness. And also in our Answering Autism book, we have sections on tactile integration. And then we expand on that and go into a lot more detail in our online courses, in the Doman Method course online, and also in the Answering Autism course. All right, I'm going to go now and see if there are any questions. So yeah, whether you're joining me on YouTube, Facebook, or Instagram, go ahead and start typing your questions into the chat box. I'll get to them in order. I often find a lot of the questions come at the end. I recommend you not wait until the end to get your questions in. Sometimes I can't answer all of them. While I'm waiting for questions, a couple of quick announcements. So, we have our final online courses scheduled for each language through the rest of the year. So we've got one more English Doman Method course and one more English Answering Autism course for 2024. We've got one more Spanish course, one more Italian, one more Serbian, one more Russian. I think I've got them all covered there, scheduled for the rest of the year. And then after that, all the next courses are coming in 2025. So if you're interested in starting the Doman Method this year with your child, I recommend you reach out to us as soon as possible and you find out about the dates. I think Colleen's here. Hi, Colleen.
Hi, Spencer.
Hey, everyone, this is Colleen Hudson. Colleen is our Director of Representatives. Colleen, the English course, I believe, is coming up in November. Is that right?
That's right. Yes, okay. November 4th is the next English Doman Method course, and it's also the next Answering Autism course.
Got it. And do you remember when the Spanish course is off the top of your head?
Yes, October 7th.
October 7th. Great. Thank you. Yeah, so everyone, we haven't actually finalized the 2025 schedule yet. So we're actually not even sure when the next courses are going to be after, as Colleen said, the English course is coming up in November and the October course for Spanish. So we actually don't even know when the next course will be. So that's why, it's important if you're interested in taking those courses, you reach out sooner rather than later.
May I add something?
Yeah, please. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I do want to mention that the fall course does tend to be our most popular. It does tend to be the one that actually fills up with a waiting list. That's happened the last, I think, 2 years. And I think honestly, folks, it has something to do with back to school vibes, kind of or let's get this information before the end of the year, all laudable stuff. But we do cap enrollment because we want to make sure that all of our staff have enough time to spend with each participant, and because there's a lot of coaching involved in the course, so you get personalized answers to your questions for your child, and that that takes a lot of staff focus. So we do cap enrollment. So I would really recommend, if you are thinking about the course, please contact us sooner rather than later and get your spot, because it's definitely a course that fills up.
Yeah, Yeah, that's a great point, Colleen. Because right now we're doing in August, Doman Method course and Answering Autism course. And as Colleen said, we'll usually restrict one coach to maybe 5 families, something like that, to make sure everyone gets the coaching and help that they need. So I think that's a great point. All right, thanks, Colleen.
Yeah, you bet.
All right, so I will now turn it over to all of you who has a question that they'd like to ask. We mentioned courses before. In terms of upcoming trips for Doman International, we just came back from doing our first clinics in Miami, Florida, which was fantastic. It's great always to launch our work into a new region. So we're very, very happy. Florida is amazing because Florida is one of the most represented states on our program, but also it's easy for many families in Latin America to travel there. So we've got Miami. Our next trips are, we've got a trip to Serbia and Croatia at the end of September. We're going to our European Center in Italy in October. We're seeing families in India, in New Delhi, and in Bangalore in November. In December, we're doing appointments in California. And our trip, and then Miami, Florida is scheduled for February of 2025. That's when the next trip is. All right, I don't see any questions yet coming in on Instagram or on Facebook. All right, let me talk a little bit while we're waiting for questions specifically about the Doman Cookbook and Doman International's nutrition program. So one of the things that we do with children, right? There are 6 different components of the Doman Method where we work on 6 different areas of child brain function and development. And when we combine those 6 different components, that's when we get the best results with children. Well, one of those components is nutrition. And we find that both diet and supplementation is an essential part of any child with special needs getting better, right? Improving in function. And the reason for that is, we have brain cells both in our brain and around our body, right? Because the rest of our body is constantly communicating with the brain. And so there are actually 500 million brain cells in our digestive tract and gut. And so our gut, our digestive tract, is constantly sending information to the brain. And so what we eat very much has an impact on brain function. And many parents have even heard at this point about the gut-brain connection, what's called the gut-brain connection. And so what we find is that when we improve the microbiome, which is the bacteria and the flora in the digestive tract, we tend to get obvious and real life changes in a child, right? So very often we will find that with improved diet, for example, with children who might be hyperactive, we'll see more focus and concentration, right? With children with social issues, you might see more eye contact and ability to connect with others. With children who might have seizures or epilepsy, we might see a decrease in seizures. For children who have frequent illnesses, we see less illness, right? We saw several children in our clinics last week in Florida who parents said that they had an amazing decrease in illnesses, fewer ear infections, less need for antibiotics, fewer chronic infections, right? Some parents even tell us their children are the healthiest members of the family. It's a common thing actually that we hear. And that's because their diet and their supplementation is set up to maintain good health, but also improve brain function. So the gut microbiome, that bacteria and flora that populates our digestive tract, is very, very important for brain function. And this is not something which is necessarily obvious for people, right? You wouldn't think that bacteria in our digestive tract could impact the way we think and behave and function, but it absolutely does. And for many children, because of overuse of antibiotics, often a lot of their good bacteria and flora has been wiped out, and bad bacteria and flora has populated their gut. So what we find is that when we provide the right kinds of supplementation and dietary changes, we can repopulate the digestive tract with the good bacteria and flora. And when we do that, we see all of these real life changes in children. Now, that requires some work, right? It requires often cutting out certain foods, right? So for example, we find that with many children on our program, before they start the program, they have high levels of candida, which is yeast, in their digestive tract. And the problem is yeast feeds on sugar. So when a child eats a lot of sugar, and that could be processed sugar, right, that is added to foods, it's a common problem, or it could be natural sugar for some children that they're getting through fruit, or a combination. But those sugars feed the yeast. And when a child has high levels of candida in their gut, they very often become more irritable. They often become more hyperactive. They're less able to focus, right? And so it's very, very common, right? If we see a child who lacks focus and concentration, not wanting to socially engage, irritable or defensive, I would say, I would never want to say 100% of the time, but the vast majority of the time, those children have significant gut issues. Sometimes those are obvious to parents. Parents will point out to us that their child has chronic constipation or diarrhea, or very foul smelling stools. Sometimes parents are very well aware of these issues, but sometimes they're not. And one of the reasons why they're not aware of it is there's an issue that is very common with children with special needs, which is called leaky gut. And leaky gut is basically what it sounds like. It's, we have in our digestive tract lining around our organs, right? So I'm talking here about our stomach and our intestines. So we have the lining of the organs, but for some children, specific compounds leak out of the intestinal lining. And once they exit the intestinal lining, they enter the blood of the child. And then you have sometimes these compounds circulating around the body. And that's very, very problematic. Now, why does that happen? It's because for most of us, if we have normal gut bacteria, that bacteria absorbs those compounds. But if you don't have that good bacteria in your gut, sometimes those compounds will leak out of the gut in what is called leaky gut. And that can create all kinds of havoc because now you have things leaving the human gut that are never supposed to leave. And it creates all kinds of health issues in children. And as I said, a lot of neurological issues as well. So when we clean up a child's diet and we provide them with the supplementation to help them, very often we're providing supplementation. And by the way, it's very important that everyone watching this knows I can't give medical information for children who, especially a child I've never seen before. But I'm just speaking generally here. Children are often helped by getting a probiotic, right, which is a supplement to populate the digestive tract with the good bacteria. Very often we're giving children certain supplements to improve health, like could be vitamin C or zinc. I mentioned before the very good health results that children have on our program. And then sometimes we're providing certain supplements to help remove the bad bacteria, right? So in our digestive tract, there's good bacteria and flora and there's bad bacteria and flora. And what often happens, unfortunately, is as the good bacteria and flora reduces, the bad bacteria and flora increases and creates havoc. So sometimes, depending on the child, we really need to focus on getting rid of that bad bacteria and flora. For other children, we just have to kind of focus on repopulating the good stuff. So when we do this with children, as I said, it has real life consequences. And that's one of the reasons why the nutrition program is such an important part of the Doman Method. There's actually a book that you can find on Amazon called the Doman Cookbook. It outlines a lot of the basic parts of the Doman Method nutrition program, but it also goes into things like there's a chapter on cooking methods. You know, for many people, including myself, they didn't learn how to cook when they were children. And so having guidance with actually how to prepare foods in the best possible way is very, very helpful for parents. And then there are also about 150 different recipes in this book of meals that you can create for your child that adhere to the guidelines of the nutrition program. So I hope that it is helpful for so Yuri is asking here, in the book, can we find how to assemble a good meal for our kids? Because I try for my son not to eat any ultra processed food or candy, but he does not eat a lot of fruit during the day. Also, he usually asks for a lot of food like an adult. He really enjoys eating, even vegetables. So I don't know where to set the line. He is 5 and neurotypical. So Yuri, first of all, yes, in the book, as I said, it gives you recipes. It'll help guide you with cooking and finding the right kinds of foods for your children. Now, I do have to say, the easiest thing to do, and in a sense, it's the lazy way of doing it, but it works, is reading ingredients, right? Because one of the easiest ways to know if a processed food is problematic is if you read the ingredients and you can't pronounce something in the ingredients. That's usually an indication that that is something that is not a natural food component, that it's probably something created in the lab as a preservative or a taste enhancer or a sweetener, and those things are incredibly problematic. Yeah, I would absolutely recommend reading the book, and then also just starting to read ingredients. It's very, very important. I want to say that, and this is someone who for years, I ate I went probably 4 or 5 years without eating gluten, dairy, or sugar at one point in my life. A lot of foods that are claim to be healthy and even lacking these ingredients are not. And sometimes it's shocking what foods you might buy at a health food store, but when you look at the ingredients, you realize they have preservatives, they have added sweetener in them, but unfortunately, and this is a whole different conversation, unfortunately, in the way that foods are marketed in at least in the United States, there's a lot of dishonesty. You'll even see the words like all natural or healthy on a processed food, which is neither of those things. So it makes it very important to actually read ingredients when you're buying products. And if you cannot pronounce something, it probably is not ideal for your kid. Good question, Yuri. All right, I've got some questions coming in on Instagram. Annabella says, we lived unforgettable moments during the evaluation here in Southern Florida. Our family is immensely grateful. Thank you, Doman International. Okay, thank you, Annabella. It was amazing seeing you. Amazing seeing you. Thanks so much for your comments. So we have a comment here from Stern Machines who's saying, are you located in Miami? So no, we're located, our headquarters are actually here in Philadelphia, where we see families throughout the year. But we do make trips to different parts of the world to see families in those locations. So we just came off a trip to Miami. But that being said, if you're in the Miami area and interested in learning more, reach out to us, send us a message. And one of our representatives will give you more information. All right, who else has a question? I see we have a lot of people joining us on Instagram. Go ahead and whether your question is about, it could be about the Doman Method, but even if you have a question about child development, early childhood education, parenting, I'm really happy to take questions on any topic. Colleen, I'm going to add you if that's okay.
Sure.
Colleen, any questions that you've gotten from parents in the last week that you feel would be good to for us to talk about?
Oh yeah, to address. Yeah, I think a question I just got recently, which is something that comes up a lot, is can you do the Doman method even if your child is headed into school?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's very common. And it's interesting because right before this session, I was actually speaking to a family in Germany, and their daughter is doing amazingly well. This was a girl who could not read or do math in any way at the age, I believe, of 8, maybe 7 or 8, um, and had very significant speech problems, and has had great results with our program. But actually, because of school mandates, like educational mandates in their country, she has to attend school. But she's continuing to get great results with the program. She's learned how to read now. She's doing math, she's writing. In fact, her teacher said this was a girl who could do nothing. Who now the teacher said she's like firmly in the middle of the class, which is a great for any parent who has a child with significant learning problems is a dream, to be like middle, we'll take middle of the pack. And that's, by the way, come in 10 months for that specific girl. So yeah, and what we do with families. So first of all, we it does depend on the family, right? Because, for example, I spoke to another family last week who lives in Florida, and they said our child is failing in school and we're pulling our kid out of school because this is not a good situation for our child to be in. He feels like a failure. We don't want him to be in that situation. They actually said we're going to do the Doman program for a year while he's out of school. Other families don't have that option for a multitude of reasons. So it really does depend kid by kid. It depends family by family and priorities. But children can go to school and do the Doman method. It's absolutely possible. And usually what we do is we work with the family to come to a reasonable schedule for the child and the parent alike. And sometimes that involves helping the parents with finding a great school schedule that combines with the Doman method. Or sometimes it just has to do with parents tell us this is the amount of availability we have. We have no wiggle room here, and sometimes that means we just have to give the families a program for the amount of time that they have. But yes, the answer is the program and school can be done at the same time, and the family that's one of the things that we do when a family starts our program and they take the Doman Method course or they take the Answering Autism course. We, the coaches, have to learn about the child and the family, and then obviously give the family a plan that they are confident that they can complete. I understand that a lot of parents have a massive concern about the Doman Method because they're afraid they're going to be given something which is impossible to do. And that's completely reasonable. It's so we have really committed ourselves to giving parents programs that are reasonable because, as a coach, if a parent isn't confident that they're going to be able to do something, the possibility of them doing it is very unlikely. That's just human nature, right? Yeah. So an essential part of our relationship with parents is trust, first of all, that parents feel comfortable telling us what they can and cannot do. And then us being able to coach them along the way to make sure they've got a plan that's actually reasonable and can be done.
Okay, great.
Do you feel that answers the question?
I definitely think that it does. Yeah. At school is starting in Philadelphia, it started today. But in many parts of the US, it's already begun. But a lot of parents are also thinking, even they have a 4-year-old and they're saying, my kid is looking at starting school, in the winter or next year. And they're nervous about the prospect of trying to fit everything in. So knowing that we can adapt to every situation, I think, is really important for
Yeah.
parents to understand. There's always something you can do, and it doesn't have to be onerous or feel impossible.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have a question here, which is along the same thread from Annabella, who says many parents are still afraid of the number of hours they have to invest in daily work with their children. Can you talk a little bit about that? Yeah, and I think that Annabella, I see a lot of. I think that's a principal concern of parents when they come to our program. I actually just um, recorded a video which is on our Instagram and Facebook page specifically about this, because sometimes parents will say to me, I know this other family, I think they'd be great candidates, but they're worried they wouldn't be able to do the program. And I think that there's that concern is legitimate, and it's for two main reasons. The first reason is that sometimes, especially in the world of social media and internet, some people talk about things that they actually don't know about, right? You'll have certain people say, oh, I heard this about whatever, the Doman Method or something else, and other people hear that and they assume that's fact. Sometimes these are people that don't have any personal experience themselves, and so sometimes they create false narratives. That's possibility number one. But the second thing, which is also true, is that our program a decade, 2 decades ago, 3 decades ago, we used to teach much more a kind of one size fits all approach, where we'd say to parents, this is the program you should do based on your child's age, go and get it done. We wouldn't say it exactly like that, but that was more our form of coaching 10 plus years ago. But what we have done over the last 10 years is really learn how to construct programs that are right for a specific family. And so now, but sometimes a parent might hear something from a family who learned about the Doman Method 20 years ago. And so they hear, oh, I hear that they make you do this much program in a day. But actually, one of the first questions we ask parents when we're meeting them for the first time and getting to work with them for the first time is, what are your goals for your children? What's possible for you? What does your daily schedule look like? And then we take that information in creating a program for the kid. Because if a family, just to give everyone an example, in Miami last week, there was a family who said to me, Spencer, we can, and this is actually a family who's done our program for, I believe, 18 months now, has gotten great results with their child. But they said, look, with our current situation, because right now, unfortunately, the grandfather is having significant health issues. Mom has to give her time for her father. The mom said, look, we can do 2 to 3 hours a day maximum, 5 days a week. And she just said, this is what we can do. And I said, great, our team will create a program for that amount of time. So yeah, I want to make it clear, we're no longer doing that, where we say to parents, no, now our coaches have to work with parents. And that's why we call our work with parents a partnership, because it does require trust and respect going both ways, and creating a treatment program which is truly ideal for their case. And that will get results in the amount of time that they can give. Great. All right. Who else has a question? I think we've got about 5 or 10 more minutes left. So whether you're joining on Facebook or Instagram or YouTube, go ahead and type a question in. One common question that I get from parents, especially parents who have been on our program for a while, but maybe have taken some time off for whatever reason. It could be a family illness. Something has come up that has interrupted the program or stopped the program. So sometimes parents will ask, how do I restart with the program once we've had some time off? And this is a really important question, because obviously the way you start something is so important for the long-term success. And so my most common advice to parents when you're restarting is, number one, start with the one part of the Doman method that you're most excited to get started with. Now, for each family, that might be a different answer. Some parents might say, oh, I'm most excited to get started with reading, or I'm most excited about beginning the inclined floor if they have a child who's immobile, or I'm most excited about beginning the respiratory program because I know it helps my child with speech. Though parents will have different answers. So I say begin with that first, because we know that success creates motivation. So if you begin something and it's successful, you're going to be motivated to keep going and adding on to it. So begin with the thing you're excited about, because you're going to be most likely successful with that thing first. Then what you start doing after you've kind of put in that first foundational block, then you can start adding other programs into your daily program. So so usually I would say to parents, perhaps wait 1 to 2 weeks before adding any other part of the program, but you don't have to. Even if you wanted to focus on that first program for a month and make sure it's going consistently and well, that's absolutely fine. And then the second thing that I say is, when you restart the program, reach out to your staff coach. Right? Every family who comes onto the Doman International program has a single member of the staff who is responsible for overseeing that child's progress. When you're restarting the program, reach out to them, tell them what your plan is, and then they can help with coaching you to kind of slowly, step by step, gradually build up your child's program. I hope that's helpful. All right. Annabella says here, once we are involved in the daily work at home, we realize that we could be the best therapist for our kids. Yeah. And I'm often struck by how few parents out there realize that they are incredibly capable of doing the most important treatments for their child. I think maybe for some parents it seems too simple. It's like, no, I'm not able to do that. I need someone with a bunch of letters behind their name, in order to do things. But most parents have a sad and difficult reality when they go to most professionals. They find that actually what the professional is doing doesn't get good results. And sometimes the child greatly dislikes it, so it even creates stress and upset. And so you have this combination of things take time, they take money, they create upset, and they don't get good results. It's kind of the worst situation that someone could be in. And so, what we find is that when we give parents the very best treatments to do with their child, they can get fantastic results. Thanks, Annabella. That's a very helpful comment. All right, everyone. Well, I think we are all out of time. Colleen, I'm going to bring you back on just to see anything else you'd like to say, Colleen.
I hope everybody is enjoying the end of summer. We're looking forward to the renewed energy that everybody feels. I think in September, it's always a lot of fun and exciting. But we have reps in all different languages. Obviously, I'm speaking English right now, but if you know anybody who speaks Italian or Russian, Serbian, Spanish, even Arabic, we have our course. We could have a lecture in Arabic. We just don't have coaches in Arabic yet. But these are all options. So don't hesitate. And if you know somebody who you would like to know about the Doman Method, but you feel shy about telling them yourself, you can always get in touch with us, and we will get in touch with them for you. Okay.
Great. All right. Thanks, Colleen. Everyone, thanks so much for joining me. And look forward to seeing you all at the next webinar. Bye-bye.